All right, it's game week. Time to stop feeling sorry for ourselves and get ready for Utah. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. The bye week is over. We have football happening again this Saturday, late start, Big 12 After Dark, a 9:30 p.m. kick against Utah. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to get tickets on the secondary market. We'll tell you more about Gametime later on in the show. So the big question this week, as Utah, I was going to say Utah rolls into town, but the game's in Salt Lake. So as TCU gets ready to take that plane ride over to Utah and play the Utes. Mountain West rivalry renewed, right? Should be fun. These two teams, these two programs are similar in a lot of ways, even though, of course, the last 2 years, Utah's looked much better. I'm not sure what the mood of Utah fans is right now. Hopefully, a few of you are watching. Let me know. I can't imagine you're feeling great after losing to Arizona State, especially considering the expectations going into this year. But if you listen to the show Friday, I said this was the one game on the schedule where I just didn't really see a path for TCU to win because everything that Utah does and they're about is really counter to what TCU is doing right now. TCU is, I would say, kind of soft up front, right? Utah is not. They're very physical. They run the ball very well. TCU does not run the ball well. They do not stop the run well. They can throw it. They can pass around with Josh Hoover, even though lately that's been a struggle as well, especially in that game against Houston. And Houston did some stuff with basically just rushing 3 down linemen and selling out and dropping 7 or 8 in coverage consistently that really bothered TCU because they were able to get pressure with those defensive linemen up front. But I didn't watch it live. I was doing some high school football stuff Friday. I rewatched the Arizona State-Utah game. And Utah lost. I mean, it was a one-score ball game. They were in it for the majority of the game. Cam Rising threw 3 picks. His final stat line, he was 16 of 37, 209 yards, 3 interceptions. He said after the game himself that he's played horribly. And I don't know what they're going to do this week. I was texting with my friend Jake Hash, and we'll get to JT, the Locked On Utes host, later this week. But Jake covers BYU. He's also pretty plugged into Utah as well. And I was just like, hey, man, what's your sense right now of what they're going to do? And he was like, well, I think they're going to stick with Cam Rising. We'll kind of see how the week plays out. And I would imagine that's who's going to start Saturday night if I had to guess right now. And listen, I mean, I think Cam's a good QB. He's shown in the past that he can really play. And as of today, I'm going to pick Utah. I don't really see anything that's going to change my mind throughout the week. Isaac Wilson is their backup quarterback. And let me get his numbers up here. He's also had some struggles, especially turning the ball over. He's thrown for 830 yards, completed 55% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Now, the fascinating thing is they've turned the ball over a lot, or at least Isaac has. Cam didn't really turn the ball over until that game against Arizona State. But they've had issues with turnovers lately. I mean, the problem is TCU doesn't really force turnovers. Now, they had a couple opportunities to jump on some fumbles in that Houston game, just couldn't do it. But Marion James had that pick in the KU game. I think that was the first turnover they had forced since maybe the Long Island game. They really haven't been able to get teams off the field or create game-changing plays. So I came away from that ball game thinking, okay, maybe this is a little less dire than I thought this week. Now, I still think it's going to be really tough. Going on the road in what I feel like is going to be a really good atmosphere at night, and you're going to be playing a Utah team that's probably pissed off. Kyle Whittingham's a good coach. I imagine he'll have this group ready. And the other aspect of it is I saw Jamie Plunkett say this, and Jamie does the Frogs Insider podcast, and then he also writes for 247 Sports. He was like, after Friday night, he said, I don't have any clue who they're going to play at QB, but they might just let Micah Bernard run the ball 60 times. Micah Bernard, their running back, is having a great season. And Utah's always kind of hung their hat on being able to run the football, but he's got 676 yards and a little over 100 carries. He's averaging 6.5 yards per carry. And with this TCU defense, we have seen teams are just going to run the ball until they stop it. And really, with the exception of that Kansas game, nobody's gotten away from it. UCF did it in the second half. I mean, UCF did it really all game long. And, man, that UCF loss is looking worse by the week as they continue to spiral and struggle. But UCF did it in that comeback victory. SMU came back the next week. They switched quarterbacks to Kevin Jennings, and they did a lot of the same concepts. Houston kept it on the ground frequently just by the nature of their offense. And I would imagine a heavy dose, at least to start the game, from Utah as well, until you put them in situations where they obviously have to pass the ball. And if they can run the ball with authority and when they want, then it still matters who's playing quarterback, but honestly, it becomes a much simpler game through the QB. It's about just making throws when you have to, not turning the ball over. But I will say, man, he looked really off. I'm talking about Cam Rising. Now, part of that could just be rust after, like, he missed an entire season. He played a couple games and got hurt again. So in the past year plus, he hasn't played a whole lot. But he also just looked like a dude who wasn't completely healthy. So maybe another week of just getting some rest and recovery and timing and rhythm and practice could help him out. But he didn't look like somebody who was ready to step in and play extremely well. Now, it might not matter if they can run the ball effectively and if TCU's offense can't find a way to be efficient and score against this Utah defense. But it's just – after watching that game, I kind of came away saying, okay, I still think obviously Utah's the favorite. They're 7-point favorites according to FanDuel. And if I had to pick the game today, I'm picking them. But maybe there's an outside shot here with the bye week. I said this on Friday. I was like, okay, this is where you got to make your money as a coach. And this coaching staff is much maligned right now. Is there anything you can do, like in the run game? Or are there any wrinkles that you can throw out there with formations, with misdirection that allows you to run the ball more effectively? Defensively, can you make some changes personnel-wise or scheme-wise that give you some more opportunities to make plays and maybe tip the scales a little bit and balance this out some more? If you can, and you can just kind of hang in there, see what happens in the fourth quarter, right? The other thought I had, and I don't think they'll do this, but this is just something that I've been kind of mulling over. This offense, with the exception of the Houston game, has been pretty solid this year. Josh has turned the ball over too much lately. I think part of that is it's pressing because they're behind in a lot of these games. And when you don't have a balanced offense, it's really tough to find a way to be effective. And that might be my biggest concern. My two big concerns in this matchup. One, can you force Utah into passing situations? Because if they run the ball well, they'll just stick with that. And then secondly, if you have a one-dimensional offense against a good Utah defense, that doesn't seem like it's going to go well. And if they can get pressure with their base formations and just their down linemen, then it's going to be really tough to find plays over the top. But that being said, if your offense is able to work efficiently and march down the field, I know tempo is the name of the game. And they've honestly slowed things down a lot compared to last year. They're taking more time, milking the play clock a little bit more, getting things right. But do you go all the way committed to, hey, we're going to be really deliberate with what we do on offense. We're going to try to get long, methodical, sustained drives? Because this is not a team that produces a lot of explosive plays anyway. Like, they live in the short and intermediate passing game, which is fine. Like, you can move down the field doing that. And they've been really good in the red zone for the most part. So that hasn't been the issue that it was last year. Can you chew up the clock? Give your defense time to rest. Give your defense time to work on some adjustments in between drives and just shorten the game, right? Like, shorten the game against a team that is better than you and find a way to maximize your possessions and put pressure on them to maximize their possessions on offense when they're currently struggling. We'll see how it plays out, but my guess is they'll stick with Cam Rising. If he was healthy enough to play last week, I mean, he's their guy. But he did not look super effective in that game against Arizona State. So we'll see what his effectiveness looks like against TCU. I'm sure a lot of Utah people are looking at this like, hey, it's a get-right game. But hopefully the Frogs can spoil that. When we take a break, when we come back, some of you have been asking me a question about Sonny Dykes and other people the Frogs could have hired. So we'll look into those hypotheticals next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If you need to find talent for your small business, go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. LinkedIn Jobs is a place to go. You can post your job for free there. And two of the most important things about LinkedIn. One, the best talent in the job market is looking on LinkedIn, and they're not looking anywhere else. 70% of people who are on LinkedIn are not on other leading job boards. So if you're not using LinkedIn, then you're not getting the best talent available. 86% of small businesses say they get a qualified candidate within 48 hours. That's the type of speed and efficiency that you want. You don't want to waste your time with this. You need to find the right people that fit your culture, who do what you want to do, who are talented, and you need to do that quickly. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege. It's not just another job board. It helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Again, that's LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. It's the best place to go if you're hiring for your small business or hiring in general. So I've been getting this question recently. A couple people DM'd me this weekend and were asking about the coaching search 3 years ago. Because Sonny is, I talked about in segment one, they're on the hot seat, right? Like the entire coaching staff, especially Sonny. And I don't have a great feel for what they're going to do. I think if things keep trending downward, they'll make a change. But I feel like if he shows some stability, then there's a good chance that they'll roll one more year with him in 2025 because they're going to have a veteran team, keep this coaching staff together. I'm not saying that's what I want to happen. I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves, kind of understanding where we're at. Now, the thing that throws a wrench in this, in my mind, is your boosters, who are the ones that will ultimately have to pony up to pay the buyout and then make the change. Sonny's not their guy. They had great relationships with Gary, and I'm not saying they had a bad relationship with Sonny, but they don't have the same amount of loyalty to him as the previous regime because there's just not as much relational capital there, right? Even though at the end of the Gary era, it was really rough, he was still the guy that led you from the abyss to the, pinnacle of college football. And that meant something. And Sonny, in year one, got you to a place where you'd never been before, but since then, it's been very inconsistent. And really, it's just been bad. Like, inconsistent is probably a generous word. They've been below average since that great run in 2022. But I was thinking about, people have been asking me about the candidates that were also up for the job when Sonny got it, which in my mind, the three people that they really considered outside of Sonny, and it depends on who you ask. Some people are like, it didn't matter who was considered. They were locked in on Sonny from the jump. But the other people that were interviewed and considered from reports that we know, Dion, they gave Dion an interview. And really, TCU was the first Power 5 school to entertain that notion. I remember I did a show because Zach Evans tweeted, I think, that they wanted Dion to coach. He was still at Jackson State, and he was doing a good job there. Had obviously brought in a lot of talent, his son and Travis Hunter. And they were the first Power 5, conference school to really say, okay, let's see what he has to say. They talked to him. They ended up not hiring him. And then the next year, of course, he gets hired by Colorado. Billy Napier, who is now at Florida. And, for like a solid 3 or 4 years, before that he was at Louisiana. And Billy was like the hottest name in the market as far as G5 coaches go. Like, he was supposed to be the next dude up. when people talked about innovative young minds and dudes who could build a great culture, he had experience with Nick Saban. He'd been around the SEC. He was kind of like the can't miss guy for the next dude up. So I was pretty excited about that. And then the other name that we heard, there wasn't as much smoke here, but there were rumors about Matt Campbell. There being some mutual interest there. He ended up staying at Iowa State. I don't think he was actually offered the position, but depending on who you ask, there's different reports on how serious that was. There was some real talk, though, from what I can tell. So Matt Campbell's kind of turned things around. He had a great run with Breece Hall and Brock Purdy, and they went through sort of a downturn. They changed offensive coordinators this offseason, and they're 6-0. They just beat West Virginia. They're rolling. They look like they might be up there with K-State as the best team in the league. BYU, the power brokers right now. Billy Napier is really struggling at Florida. Now, they did play Tennessee pretty competitively this weekend, but he's most likely going to get fired at the end of the season. That has not been a great run for him. And a lot of the expectation, he had the mess with Jaden Rashada, where they promised him an NIL deal and then they didn't end up delivering on it. And so he got out and went to Arizona State for a year. Now he's at Georgia. DJ Langway is a really talented player, the quarterback from Willis, a 5-star talent. And he's played some and looked impressive this year. I don't think that'll save his job, but that's kind of the one feather in his cap right now. He's brought in some other talented players as well. But by and large, hasn't been much of a success. Deion, this Colorado team is pretty solid. Like, they played Kansas State tough last week. They've dropped one conference game. They dropped the game to Nebraska. I don't think they're going to run the table the rest of the way. But he's clearly elevated the ceiling there. And the thing with Deion, if TCU had hired him, obviously, like, the relevance just goes through the roof. Like, the attention, everything that comes with it is incredible. Because I don't think people really remember, like, how emotionless that Colorado program was before he got there. That's probably not the right word. But when TCU played them in 2022 in the season opener, it was difficult outside of the local newspaper guy who I ended up getting, Brian Howell, who's a really good dude and has done a nice job covering the Deion era too. But outside of him, it was hard to find people that were even like fan sites or anything that were even covering that team. They were coming off a 1-11 season. There was no juice. It was a very irrelevant program. And it felt like the doormat of the Pac-12. And, of course, he got there and everything goes crazy. And I think the question with Deion is, in some ways I feel like him being in DFW, even though I think regional recruiting is kind of overrated now because recruiting is so national and NIL is such a big factor. But having him here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area would be huge because he's got roots here. He knows coaches around the area. I think, like, that would help recruiting in general. High school recruiting hasn't been, like, a big priority for them. And the question with him from the start, but especially now, has been like, okay, what happens when Shedeur goes to the NFL? Is this just like, is his goal just to follow him from high school to the NFL? Like, is he going to keep working at the same level? Is he going to keep bringing in the same amount of talent when that transition happens? I don't know. And I think ultimately, like, his dream job, the interesting thing this offseason too is his dream job would be Florida State. But I don't know if that's on the table. Like, that could be open at the end of the year. We'll see what happens. But anyway, Billy Napier, I think if they hired Billy, I don't feel like they would have been better in 2022. And maybe they're in a better situation long term, but the results have been pretty mixed. If you hire Deion, I think they're probably playing better right now than they are at the moment, but long-term, I don't know. The one guy that I would be interested in, if the job came open again, circling back to, is Matt Campbell. Now, in a vacuum, I think the TCU job is better. The tricky thing is Iowa State's one of those places where if you win, not even if you win like conference titles and go to the playoffs, but if you just win at a consistent level, 8 or 9 games, which he's done, you can stick around for as long as you want. And so I'd imagine he's in a very comfortable place where he has job security, he's taken care of financially, and he just feels like he can kind of do what he needs to do to be successful and has a lot of freedom, which is what you want as a coach. But that's the only of the people that were up for the job a few years back. That's the only person really in my mind that I would be like, man, it would be really intriguing to see him at TCU. It would be intriguing to see Deion at TCU too, just what he could do with the resources available. But I think Campbell's a really solid coach, and I feel like he's made a living kind of doing more with less, which is very similar to what Gary did here. But those were the guys that were for the job last time. And I think, as you can tell, it's an inexact science. It wasn't like a slam dunk with any of those potential hires. But I still believe, I think Sonny is a good coach. I don't think he's just this totally inept person. I don't know what's happened. It seems like he's kind of lost this team. And I think it's going to be really difficult to bring it back. But there's still games on the schedule, and there's still time to figure it out. So we'll see what they do starting this week with Utah. When we come back, I'll update you on soccer, also some preseason basketball news, and get to some of your reaction. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Game Time. If you need tickets, check out the Game Time app today. I opened it up this morning, seeing what tickets are going to look like for TCU Baylor in a few weeks when the Frogs come down to Waco. If you're interested in that upcoming game against Oklahoma State on November 9th, when the Frogs come back home to face Texas Tech, Game Time app is the place to be. Download it today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. One thing I love about the Game Time app, you can wait till the last minute. They have flash sales, last-minute deals, so you don't have to be a great planner. Even if you're like, man, I want to see if these ticket prices will go down, you can do that. They give you a great view of what your seat's going to be. You just click on it, shows you a picture. Here's what you're going to be looking at. Game Time, they make it really simple for you. It goes straight to the app, so you don't have to worry about, where did this ticket go? You can find it. It's right there on the app. Download the Game Time app today, Locked On College, for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so a couple notes from other sports. TCU soccer, they beat Arizona State 5-0 or 5-1. Might have been the final score there on Sunday. Looked really good again. Feels like this team is figuring it out at the right time. I know they got some young players, some freshmen. They're now 11-2-2 overall and 6-0-2 in conference play. So they haven't lost in conference play. They've tied a few games. 5-1 was the victory. And that was their last home game. Their last 3 games are on the road. Thursday, they play at UCF. So that'll be intriguing. But they're right there at the top of the standings, along with Texas Tech as we get towards the end of the season here. They're tied with Tech right now with the same record. West Virginia, Colorado, Oklahoma State, all behind them right now. And I believe Ray Cartwright was telling me they've kind of hit the toughest part of their schedule. Some other teams that are in contention are hitting the toughest part of their schedule now. TCU volleyball, they defeated BYU in 5 sets. And I saw on Twitter, Ray was saying they were battling a stomach bug, but they came back and won that one. So nice bounce back win after getting swept in straight sets by Utah. Also, the KenPom rankings came out today, which KenPom is just an analytics rankings, power rankings of teams in college basketball. They use it, though, when we talk about seeding in the tournament, making the tournament, those types of things. So Jamie Plunkett retweeted this. TCU is 58th overall. They're the 57th ranked offense and the 64th ranked defense. And, I think expecting again to play at a fast pace. Jamie Dixon said they want to rebound the ball really well this year, especially on the offensive glass. They feel like they can do that effectively. So we're about a month away, a little less than a month away from TCU basketball starting up as well. It'll be fun to see that team in action as they try to make the tournament again and bounce back from that tough loss to Utah State to end the season. Once again, transfer portal heavy group, basically an entirely different team than you've had the last few years, and we'll see how quickly they can kind of gel together and get going as the season goes on. Some thoughts from Friday's episode in the YouTube comments. Mountaineer Mike said the last few years TCU started most games slow, but it seems like they'd make adjustments. In 2022, I knew being down at the half, they were fine and could close. And he's going to go watch a TCU volleyball game soon, and he appreciates appreciate the coverage there. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't really know what the change has been. Some of these teams have always kind of started slow, and it's frustrating. I don't really know what the reasoning for that is. I mean, aside from the UCF game, I feel like in all the games they started kind of sloppy. I guess Long Island, I think they had a blocked punt early, and they did some things to make the score look good, but it took a while again to really get the wheels turning. But you're right. Like in 2022, they made big-time adjustments week to week, and it felt like they were able to hang in there and schematically make some changes. And right now, it just doesn't feel like they're as adept at that, and I don't have a great reason as to why. Jim says, to my surprise, Avalos is a bust. He mentioned bringing in Robert Saleh, the Jets defense coordinator. I mean, Andy Avalos, it's been rough. I thought it would be better than this, and I'm confused. Like, I know the personnel is hamstringing you a little bit, but I don't have a great reason for why they're struggling so much. I don't think it's time to let him go. Now, I mean, as I've said, with the coordinators, like, so much of this revolves around Sonny's job status too. If they decide to move on from Sonny, you're going to have new coordinators. If they don't, I think it's going to stay the same for the purpose of continuity. We'll see what he can do in the second half of the season. As far as Robert Saleh goes, I imagine he wants to be an NFL coach. And he's going to be highly coveted as an NFL DC. He was in a rough situation with the Jets. Seems like Aaron Rodgers is running the show there. They're also the Jets, and they're just typically a very badly run organization. But, yeah, I think his priority will be NFL jobs, so I don't see that happening. Blake Murphy says Utah's coming off a loss. Utah's well coached, disciplined, plays with emotion. Utah's better than TCU at every skill position. So he thinks the losses will continue for the Frogs. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm picking Utah right now, but I think there's a path here if you can make some plays and maybe some adjustments are made during the bye week. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they get out there. And yeah, I think Utah's a good team. I don't think this is the Utah team though that we saw the last 2 years. That would probably just bowl over this. But I do think the loss is them coming off a loss is an interesting aspect of this game, because I do expect a motivated group that under Kyle Whittingham is going to be ready to play, is going to be ready to lock in and not make a ton of mistakes and beat themselves. And unfortunately, TCU has been known this year for making mistakes and beating themselves. And when you can't do that against good teams. If you're going to pull off an upset, you have to find a way to play a clean game. Don't turn the ball over. Don't have a ton of penalties, and force some turnovers. And TCU hasn't done that this year. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Tune into the show tomorrow. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and your favorite podcast platform.